6 months after Protocol 7 activated, the Courtesy Coalition held its first meeting in the renovated Assembly Hall. Renovated being a polite way of saying rebuilt after humans demonstrated alternative uses for architectural structures. The crystal throne had been replaced with something less ostentatious. Amazing how humble species become when their survival depends on not being interesting. Elder Whisp of the Etherian Collective materialized at the center of the room, their psychic form rippling with colors that hadn't been seen since before most species achieved spaceflight. The Etherians had stayed neutral during the whole "let's mock the humans" phase, which now looked less like wisdom and more like they knew something nobody else did. Fellow beings, Wisp's voice resonated directly in everyone's minds, bypassing those pesky language barriers. We have called this emergency session to discuss the human situation. Ambassador Thorne sat in his usual spot, wearing his usual suit, with his usual patient smile. The only difference was his shadow, which had given up all pretense of matching his movements and was currently playing what appeared to be cat's cradle with itself, using too many fingers. Situation? Thorne asked pleasantly. I wasn't aware we had a situation. Trade routes are open, conflicts are at an all-time low, and everyone's being so wonderfully polite to each other. It's everything we always wanted. The Zakrel representative, not Vextor, who was currently experiencing existence in ways that grammar hadn't evolved to describe, clicked nervously. Yes, Ambassador, perhaps too polite. Our species hasn't had a proper territorial dispute in months. It's affecting our cultural identity. Oh no, Thorne said with zero sincerity. How terrible for you. Elder Wisp pulsed a soothing shade of blue. Ambassador Thorne, we've brought you here to discuss a proposal. We believe we can recreate the conditions that made humans diplomatic. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Thorne's smile didn't change, but his shadow stopped playing and turned what might generously be called its attention to the Etherian. You want to rehabilitate us, Thorne said. Again. We've studied your history, Dr. Kretak of the Medical Consortium interjected, his 6 arms clutching data tablets. Your species underwent voluntary chemical and psychological conditioning to suppress your nature. We can synthesize those compounds. How delightful, Thorne leaned forward. And you've tested this theory? We have a volunteer. They brought in Lieutenant Derek Morrison in what looked like a crystalline containment unit, wrapped in energy fields, wrapped in prayers to deities that probably didn't want to get involved. Morrison looked normal, if you ignored how his reflection showed too many angles, and his breathing sounded like a swarm of locusts discussing philosophy. Hey, Ambassador, Morrison waved with a hand that definitely had the standard number of fingers, just not necessarily in the standard arrangement. These folks think they can make me nice. Isn't that sweet? Dr. Kretak activated the treatment protocol. The room filled with a soft hum as synthesized compounds flooded Morrison's containment unit. The lieutenant breathed deeply, his expression shifting from predatory amusement to something approaching serenity. It's working, someone whispered. Morrison's eyes opened. They were calm, peaceful, understanding. Oh, he said softly. Oh, I see now. I understand everything. The coalition held its collective breath. You're trying to drug us, Morrison continued in that same serene tone. That's adorable. Like giving candy to a hurricane and hoping it decides to be a gentle breeze. He stood up. The containment unit parted around him like water. Because why wouldn't it? Physics were more like suggestions when humans got creative. See, here's what you missed, Morrison stretched, his form rippling in ways that required non-Euclidean geometry to properly appreciate. Those chemicals you synthesized? We don't process empathy like you do. For us, it's basically recreational. You just gave me the equivalent of the galaxy's best high. Dr. Kretak's 6 arms dropped their tablets simultaneously. But the historical data was written by humans, Thorne supplied helpfully. Did you really think we'd give you accurate information about our weaknesses? Morrison was now somehow outside the containment unit while also still being inside it. This is amazing. I can feel all your fears. They taste like cotton candy made of screams. Is this what being nice feels like? Because I love it. The medical station had to be evacuated. When recovery teams finally entered 3 days later, they found the entire facility had been rearranged into a fractal pattern that spelled out "thanks for the party drugs" in 17 different languages. Elder Whisp, to their credit, didn't flee like the others. "We've met your kind before," they admitted, their form shifting to show age beyond measure. 10,000 years ago, we were the ones who helped you create those first rules. Thorn's shadow actually applauded. "Now we're getting somewhere interesting. Your species came from beyond the galaxy's edge," Wisp continued. "You weren't conquerors. You were collectors. You found other species fascinating the way a child finds insects fascinating. The problem was what you did with that fascination." The Etherian projected memories directly into the room. Ancient humanity, spreading across stars not with warships, but with curiosity that bordered on cosmic horror. Planets where humans had collected interesting specimens and arranged them in living dioramas. Entire civilizations kept in states of perpetual conflict because humans found their wars aesthetically pleasing. "The museum worlds," Thorn nodded appreciatively, "some of our best work. The spiral wars of Proxima, where we kept two species fighting in perfect Fibonacci sequences for 3 centuries. Beautiful." "You're monsters," someone whispered. "No," Thorn corrected. "Monsters have purpose. We were bored. Do you understand the difference? A monster kills for food, for territory, for survival. We rearranged civilizations because Tuesday afternoons dragged on too long." "But you changed," Elder Wisp insisted. "You created rules, became diplomatic." "We created rules because we nearly ran out of toys." Thorn's shadow was now making origami out of space-time. "Do you know how boring the galaxy becomes when you've collected everything? When every species either serves you or exists in your museums? We needed you to evolve, to become interesting again. So we pretended to be nice, gave you 3 centuries to develop new cultures, new technologies, new ways of thinking. The Coalition's collective horror was palpable. And then you laughed at us." Thorn stood, straightening his tie. "Called us weak, destroyed our embassies, killed our children, made us realize that you hadn't become more interesting. You'd just become more arrogant." "What do you want?" Gorvak asked from his diminished throne. "Entertainment," Thorn said simply. "Give us something interesting, or we'll make our own fun. And trust me, you don't want us getting creative." "What could possibly entertain a species like yours?" Thorn's smile widened. "Oh, I have some ideas. But first you should know, the collectors are waking up." "The collectors?" "The ones who never underwent rehabilitation. The ones we've been keeping sedated in the deep dark between galaxies. They've heard there are new specimens to catalog." The lights in the assembly dimmed as something vast moved between the stars, heading toward Coalition space. "Don't worry," Thorn said cheerfully. "They're very polite. They'll ask permission before they add you to their collection. Of course, they consider screaming to be consent, but nobody's perfect."